And that was in 2008 when we began to see the economic downturn. It first came in housing, when some countries, the US and my own, the UK, became clear that money had been lent to buy property that was hugely overvalued without proper scrutiny. The upholstery sector for households began to decline. The big moment was the 14th of September, when Lehman went bankrupt. In general, until that time, the industry had sort of felt that we would get through without too much of a problem. And then suddenly, everything came to a stop. And by January 2009, every sector was hurting. The automobiles sector worldwide had pretty much come to a stop. And it hadn't been helped by the fact that the automobile industry had lots of supply chain managers who hadn't bothered to understand the fundamentals of industrial life and didn't realize that if they didn't buy the hides, they would have to go somewhere else, and that hides weren't a commodity that could be switched on and off. Other sectors' orders were cancelled, they were reduced, or they were renegotiated, and the new norm became minus 30%. And for a while we had to live with that. Some parts of the world, hides were even thrown away for a period. But if you start to look forward from 2010, you begin to see that some interesting outcomes are working themselves out here. The automobile industry didn't change as much as we expected. That was because governments decided to protect their domestic industries. So we haven't lost the capacity that perhaps we should, or that we had expected. The focus of growth has moved hugely to China, which is the largest market for light automobiles right now, and where prestige cars have been selling very well. And just this week, Audi announced that it was going to sell more than 1 million cars this year, and it saw no potential worldwide for a double dip in sales. And the only country with which it saw problems was Greece. So premium automobiles have had an exceptional 2010. Overall, though, I think we are looking at what's going to happen in the growth of the smaller cars. How far down the range will leather go into automobile becomes the question. Now, BMW have been absolutely delighted by the fact that their Mini has leather in 50% of the cars they're selling, far more than they expected. And of course in China, consumers love leather in their cars, and VW offer leather as standard right down into their Jetta range in China. And recent market research has been done by the upholstery automobile tanners, which indicate that the consumer, including the younger consumer about whom the leather industry knows very little, is still very dedicated towards leather and likes to see it in cars. So the automobile industry is currently feeling very positive. Now, throughout 2010, prices for tanners and for leather products have been quite tough. Raw materials have been bouncing back up, but it is very hard in a world of high unemployment to raise prices significantly. And we have seen some changing habits. The Russians bought less milk. The Brazilians traveled less. And in the USA, we're seeing what you call a sort of a new frugality. And it's playing in a curious way into what some magazines and commentators are calling the new abnormal economics, in terms of how people use their disposable income. The middle ground's become a very tough place to play, as consumers are really shopping for value. But consumers are showing they're very interested in the truly authentic, the really good running shoe, the really high quality premium handbag. They're also curious because they're saying they're poor, but they're marching into shops still to buy the $3 latte. They're queuing up to buy the newest iPhone or the newest iPad. The consumer is spending money in different ways than we might have expected, considering that we are in times of the new frugality. And then we have two types of consumers that in a way we're lost and most worried about. One is those families in the United States and certain parts of Europe who were hit by the perfect storm of high debts and their property values crashing, their pension values crashing, and their savings crashing. 30-40% of household wealth washed out just through this recession on its own. And the other group are the unemployed, 10% in the United States, 20% in countries like Spain. Unemployed people can't spend money as they used to in the past. But at the same time, it has been frankly astonishing how well premium quality leather goods have done this year. Louis Vuitton is closing its doors early with its French stores because it doesn't have enough stock left for Christmas. Double-digit growth in just the first half of this year. Many luxury brands are finding exactly the same thing. They've underestimated the consumer's demand for high-quality, authentic products. A leather handbag is on the one hand a small indulgence that brightens up the miserable life of frugality and feeling poor, and on the other hand it's an investment for the long term. And of course, luxury products are doing exceptionally well in China. And the consumer mechanism in China is different from in the rest of the world. And with disposable income, there's a requirement to buy luxury products to demonstrate your status. It's a significant aspect of what the Chinese call face. And so you find even young students, helped of course by the fact of the single parent policy is making them rich, are queuing for selected brands like the Chanels, the Rolexes, and the Louis Vuittons. Footwear generally has been hit worldwide less dramatically than was expected, and probably is best described as flat, but there have been some quite big regional variations. I think here and in Central America there's been quite a big hit in the reduction of remittances coming from the United States, which has impacted on domestic consumption. But there's one figure in the footwear industry side of things that you do want to bear in mind, which is that the China Leather Industry Association is starting to say that they think that by 2015 the Chinese consumer consumption of footwear will move towards 3 pairs per capita. Just do the sums. Right now, Chinese consumption per capita is 1.5 pairs. Right now, the Chinese population is 1.4 billion. Start doubling that, you need 2 billion more pairs of shoes. Maybe it won't be 2015, maybe it'll be 2017, but you're talking big numbers. And are we going to see something similar in India too, which is growing? So there is a question you need to ask yourself, where will all these extra shoes come from? And what's the implication going to be for China's continued dominance over the rest of the world if it has to meet an addition